We're back once again to show off even more weird visual tricks in Super Smash Bros. Ultimate that the stage designers never intended for you to see. And it's all thanks to how powerful the in-game pause screen camera is this time, allowing us to get all kinds of new angles on the action, which is enhanced even further by the ability to advance the game frame by frame while doing so. Now, if you missed our previous video, make sure to check it out first for numbers 1 through 10, as we'll be picking up right where we left off at with 7 more. So let's get to it. And we're starting off with a big one. And we mean that. Yep, we're talking about Kraid, baby. And thanks to the new camera, we can get an even better sense of scale for how big this guy truly is. And he is massive. And not only does he tower over the stage, but he's incredibly detailed too. Never before has something so grotesque been so beautiful. Except for you, King K. Rool, you'll always be my first love. And the camera allows us to get all kinds of new angles on him, including this one, which shows that he actually does strike the stage, causing the entire thing to rotate. Which is pretty cool considering the fact that it's nearly impossible to tell during gameplay whether he actually hits it or not. Anyways, all of this is beside the point. Because have you ever wondered what Kraid does in his off time when he's not flipping out underneath the lava? Is he just chilling like a villain down there? Well, we can take a look for ourselves by zooming all the way out and dipping the camera underneath the lava surface before he pops out. Well, he's nowhere to be found. Wait, there he is! Yep, he pops into existence just before he's needed. And we can see that he is a fully modeled character, even his feet, even though you pretty much only see his torso during the game itself. But interestingly, he starts to animate right away before he's even visible from above the surface. So it's only by moving the camera down here that we can see the full extent of it. Also, did you notice his legs are red? No, that's not a rug burn. Instead, it's supposed to represent the glow from the lava surface. Except rather than it being a real-time lighting effect, it's baked into his model. Now when he's done to this song and dance, as you might expect, he pops out of existence just as he entered. Who would have guessed that Kraid is actually a magician? Gerudo Valley is a beautiful stage with some pretty impressive details, like the entirety of Gerudo's fortress being visible in the background. However, unlike most of the other Zelda stages, this one skimps a bit when it comes to the off-screen details, in that there are almost none to be found. What you see of the stage is pretty much what you get, and we can really see the extent of that if we raise the camera as high as it'll go. Once we've done that, we can click one of the control sticks to activate the tilt motion controls, which allows us to get an even more extreme perspective that the stage designers never intended us to have. And it exposes all kinds of things, such as how the skybox isn't even completely filled in, with the bottom half just being a black void. We can also see that the mountains in the background are actually a relatively small rectangular image that's just large enough to cover the normal range of the camera. And then the terrain around Gerudo Fortress doesn't even extend all the way to the rockwork. And while we're here, we might as well zoom in for an unobscured look at Gerudo Fortress. Finally, the targets to the top right aren't actually resting on anything at all. Huh, maybe it's just due to that witch magic. The Mushroomy Kingdom offers a rather unique take on the classic World 1-1, both by showing what it looks like after being neglected for a few decades, and also by turning it into an auto-scrolling level that loops indefinitely. And since the camera doesn't ordinarily stray at all from its predetermined path during gameplay, that makes the stage a perfect candidate to see what happens if we do exactly that. And first up is the fact that, like with Big Blue from our previous episode, this stage also loads in segments, which is what allows it to loop back onto itself. Only this time, the individual segments are far larger in size and thus fewer in numbers, which makes seeing the process in action a lot harder compared to Big Blue, as it happens even well beyond the view of the pause screen camera. That is, unless we swing the camera all the way to the side, and then click the stick in, allowing us to rotate the camera even farther from there. And sure enough, we can see a giant gap before the next portion of the stage loads into view, which is far in advance of where the fighters actually are. But it's looking a little barren, isn't it? As it turns out, the bricks and blocks don't actually pop into view until much later, at the blast zone, and they pop out in the exact same way on the other side. And check this out, this property applies to the flagpole and castle too. They both pop into the world just moments before they're needed on screen, before popping out again in the exact same way. And they even slightly modify the terrain around them too. So you might be wondering why they exist as separate objects instead of being part of the background. Well, that's likely for one very specific reason, because if they were part of the backdrop, then you would see them at the very start of the match, before even completing a loop. And we can't have that now, can we? Mario can't reach a flagpole just by going left. Okay, before we move on, if we zoom out the camera all the way and pan down, we can see just how deep the terrain and bottomless pits go, before dropping into what seems to be an endless void. Yeah, we wouldn't want to fall down there. So it's probably no surprise that the auto-scrolling 3D land stage works pretty similar to Mushroomy Kingdom, with interactive objects appearing and disappearing at the blast zones. But there is something else that's a little bit more interesting once you reach the final section. Because if we turn the camera to the left while riding these platforms, we can find a giant hole in the hillside. We're used to gaps in Mario games, but nothing quite like this. And while we're in this section, have you ever wondered what happens to the warp pipe after taking it back to the start of the level? Well, if we tilt the camera up and go frame by frame as we're traveling through it, we can see that it simply disappears. Did the warp pipe just warp itself out of existence? Whoa. As it turns out, 3D Land isn't the only stage with some revealing shortcomings in the environment. Because if we swing the camera in Reset Bomb Forest to take a look at the left side of the castle, we can see a portion of it that isn't modeled at all. Which, like in 3D Land, makes sense considering we were never intended to see it in the first place. But it does stand out in the stage considering how detailed everything else is. And Reset Bomb Forest truly is gorgeous, in its own depressing way. Now of course, that's partly achieved by way of clever tricks. For instance, if we zoom in on the background army that's constantly moving around, we can see that they exist simply as a series of independent 2D billboards. And while they're kind of indistinguishable at close range, it's a remarkably convincing effect from a distance. And would you believe a similar trick is used for the castle in the background too? It seems to be just a couple of 2D billboards too, that are set far enough apart from each other to offer the illusion of depth. And guess what? This goes for the distant mountains too, which is textured in such a way to offer the illusion of depth, despite it quite clearly being a flat texture from up close. But again, from a distance, it's a near-perfect illusion. Perhaps one of the most impressive moments of any stage in Smash Bros. History is how Pirate Ship goes from a calm day out at sea, well, relatively, to, oh my god, I'm caught in a freaking hurricane, which tosses the boat up into the air, far above the storm, before it comes crashing back down to Earth, or Hyrule. It is so awesome. But have you ever wondered how exactly that works? Well, thanks to the new camera, we can get a different perspective that reveals at least some of the magic. So the entire sequence, of course, starts with overcast skies and some rain, which a quick twist of the camera reveals is actually just multiple layers of falling 2D sprites. And they're localized to just immediately around the boat. Now, it's not long before the cyclone appears and throws the boat into the air. So if we zoom out the camera and go frame by frame, we can see that the boat is actually traveling upward through a cylinder that's wrapped in a sky texture. And along the way, you'll pass by the occasional bright, thin layer of clouds that add some dimension to the scene. And this is all before you pop out the top into a cloud-filled paradise. Briefly. But while we're up here, if we look down, we can see the entire length of the cylinder that we just traveled through, including, just barely, the little patch of water that surrounded the ship. Neat! And then, of course, we repeat the process only now in reverse. Sploosh! It's a pretty neat effect, isn't it? It doesn't get much more intense than riding the face of the Umbra Clock Tower down an endless mountainside. And we really do mean endless. Because even though there are points where you can see the ground, you'll never reach it. So how did the developers pull this trick off? Well, after some careful adjustment, we were able to position the camera to aim straight down while using the frame-by-frame option to see exactly what's going on here. And as it turns out, it's a very similar trick to what we saw in the previous episode involving the Great Plateau Tower, only this time in motion. But at first glance, or even multiple glances, it truly does look like that the mountain you're flying past extends all the way to the ground. But of course, this is just a clever illusion, consisting of a flat image of the base of the mountain that never changes. Whereas the part of the mountain that actually does exist in 3 dimensions fades into view right about here on an endless track. But it does so seamlessly, you would never spot this during actual gameplay. And the same is true if you look up toward the sky at the other direction, with the terrain fading away into a similar mountain image. And the illusion might be even more convincing from this angle, especially because it took me several minutes to find the exact cutoff point. It's truly impressive stuff. Now, while all of this is going on, angels will often swarm the platform. And they look impressively detailed, especially considering how many there are of them. But as you might have guessed, there's some trickery going on here too, and we can see exactly what that is if we swing the camera around, showing that they're actually billboarded 2D sprites. And it becomes even more apparent if we zoom in, showing that they're not quite as detailed as the game leads you to believe. But again, from a distance, it's all very effective. And there you have it, 7 more behind the scenes tricks that you can reveal with Super Smash Bros. Ultimate's new camera. But you know what? We're still not done. So stay tuned for part 3 with even more coming up very soon. And in the meantime, make sure to check out part 1 if you haven't already using the link on the screen. If you like this video, make sure to hit that subscribe button for tons more on Super Smash Bros. Ultimate and everything else Nintendo too.